Hello YouTube and welcome back to another alternate history video. And today I got the 1976 presidential election, which is which of course was held between President Ford and Democrat Jimmy Carter, who was from Georgia. And in this year of 76, like I said, it was between those two. And in this alternate scenario, though, I got Ted Kennedy, who was a senator from Massachusetts and who actually ran in 1980. He was trying to primary Carter. He was running the Carter's left on issues. Carter was seen as a more moderate Democrat back then. But like I said, Kennedy was trying to primary Carter in 1980, but that ended up failing. But Carter ended up losing a landslide to Reagan despite that. But like I said, this alternate scenario is if Kennedy ran in 76 and got the nomination. I think it would have been a tough one to try to get it because, like I said, he was more to the left of Carter, and that's pretty much why he couldn't win the 1980 primary. And of course, Carter was still the incumbent, so that still helped him despite his unpopularity that year. Like I said, this is if Kennedy ends up getting the nomination kind of in an upset in 76. We'll see how he could do against incumbent President Ford. Now, just a background, 76 was Ford, like I said, was president, but he became president a couple of years prior when Nixon resigned due to Watergate. And Ford actually pardoned Nixon, despite Nixon not being charged with anything, but he pardoned him just in case. So that kind of left a bad taste in some voters' mouths. And that kind of led to Carter's victory. Like I said, Carter was also from the South, from Georgia, so he had his appeal there, and that's what helped him pretty much get the victory. And then he also had stagflation in the 70s. So yeah, like I said, there were definitely contributing factors in this year, and it helped Carter get out a win. It wasn't too big of a victory. It was kind of close electorally, but it was still a win nonetheless for Carter. And like I said, he was a more moderate Democrat, so he definitely had his appeal in the South. And Ford did better in western states, and Carter even was able to win a few northern states impressively. But definitely his strength came in the South. But I think in this scenario, I could see Ford doing a lot better. Because, like I said, Kennedy was to the left of Carter, so I think that'd be a problem. Because Kennedy was a self described progressive. And I don't think that really bodes well in a year of 76, even with the stagflation going on. And if Ford still pardoned Nixon, maybe I think Kennedy would definitely still do well, in the Northeast where he was from, Massachusetts. And maybe could still win some Midwestern states like Minnesota, maybe. But I think Ford would still do great elsewhere, like he did in the actual scenario. And I think Ford would do better in the South since Kennedy's not Carter. I could honestly say Ford sweeping the South here because, like I said, Kennedy was to Carter's left, and he's not from Georgia like Carter was. So that's why I could say Ford doing a lot better despite the circumstances of 76. Why? Because I think he think Kennedy is too far to the left, like Nixon was able to with McGovern in 72. But anyway, getting into this, I think Ford will still take a lot of these Mountain West states that he won in the real scenario, like Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah. I say them taking them with ease. I don't really see Kennedy have much appeal in these areas, especially with Mormon voters. I think they heavily go for Ford, although Ford was seen as a more moderate Republican too, but I think they wouldn't be comfortable voting for Kennedy, so I see them sticking with Ford pretty easily. Same in the Dakotas, North Dakota, South Dakota. I think Nebraska would go for him. And I believe that was actually his birth state, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I know he was from Michigan, but I think he had some ties to Nebraska, but I could be wrong. But I think it would go for him in this scenario. The state of Kansas as well. I think Oklahoma would go for him. I think the state of Nevada would. Same with Alaska. Kennedy, however, I think will take Hawaii since I do go for Carter. I think he'd have pretty decent minority appeal. I think it'd be enough for him to hang on to win since Carter was able to. I think he would definitely take his home state of Massachusetts. I believe Rhode Island, Connecticut actually won for Carter. So since they did, I'm going to give them to Kennedy too. I'm going to check just to make sure. Yeah, like I said, Rhode Island won for Jimmy. A pretty solid margin. So I think for the reason that Kennedy would carry him too, since he was from this region. Well, looks like Ford actually won Connecticut, but so I'm actually going to take that off. But Carter did win Massachusetts and Rhode Island, so I think Kennedy would too. I think it was Delaware, Maryland, D.C. I was thinking about. Those were the ones that actually went for Carter. So in that case, I'll give him to Kennedy too, since Carter was able to win them. I think Maryland would be pretty close, but because of Baltimore, I see Kennedy pulling it out, and I definitely see him winning D.C. with ease. And I think since Carter was able to pull out Delaware, that take Kennedy could too. Like I said, going back to Connecticut, that was a state won by Carter. Or excuse me, won by Ford. But it was only a victory margin of 5%, so that's why I say this one being close, since Kennedy's from this region. See there, it says Connecticut voted more Republican than Florida, Nevada, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Texas, and Virginia. I say, like I said, I see this one being a close one. Maybe it could go to Kennedy in the end, but I think since Ford was able to pull it off, they might so narrowly pull it off. Like I say, that one actually being a toss-up, I'm not really sure. Maybe, like I said, we'll go for Kennedy in the end, but I say it being a close one, so I go to Ford since he won it against Carter. I believe he won New Jersey, too, which tended to have more of a Republican lean back then. Sometimes went for Democrats, but not too often back during this time. It was only a margin of 2%, though, which is why I think it would be close. I think John F. Kennedy was able to win in 1960. So maybe Ted would pull it off, too, because of how close it was. You know what, I'm actually going to go ahead and give Connecticut to Kennedy since I gave New Jersey. Like I said, I think there'll definitely be close ones, but I just think Kennedy's northeastern presence would be enough since John F. Kennedy was able to win them, too. Like I said, I definitely see Connecticut and New Jersey being close, and maybe Connecticut was still good for Ford, but I don't know. I think I kind of see Kennedy actually pulling them out, being from Massachusetts here. But you can just comment below what you think would happen there. New Hampshire and Vermont, however, I think would narrow up some, but I think in the end that Ford would take them both still. They tend to be really more Republican states back then, especially Vermont, voted Republican from statehood up until it actually flipped in 1964, but still continued to vote Republican after that until 1992. So that's why I can say Ford's still hanging on to it, but I think it would get kind of close. But I think Ford could pull it off in the end because it tended to be more of a moderate Rockefeller Republican state. And I think Ford would be a perfect fit for it, being a more moderate Republican himself. Same thing in New Hampshire. Ford did take all of Maine. And again, another one I could see getting closer because of Kennedy being on the ticket. So Maine was actually close. I didn't realize how close it was until looking here. Neither Canada got a majority. It was only a victory margin of 0.84, which is why I could see possibly Kennedy pulling it off. So I might give it to him. The first and second district, however, I'll have to look at, see how close they were. The first district was another close one, so maybe Kennedy would pull that off. The second district, however, was also another close one. So I think Kennedy could pull it off because, like I say, he has a northeastern factor going for him. It's definitely a tough one, but I could say Kennedy is having that strong northeastern factor, which is why I gave him those states. So Vermont and New Hampshire go for 4, but Kennedy sweeps the rest. I think Kennedy would take New York in this scenario because I did go for Carter, and I see him doing well in the boroughs. Ford would probably do a little better upstate, and Kennedy could do pretty decent there too. But I say New York City and the boroughs carrying it for Kennedy since Carter was able to win it. The state of Michigan here, I think could be kind of close because Kennedy might do pretty good with unions, but in the end, I think I would go for Gerald Ford since it was his home state and it was able to win against Carter. The state of Wisconsin and Minnesota went for Carter, however, because Carter did really good, I think, in the Driftless area, which was more of a Democratic area back then. And Minnesota, definitely Minneapolis there has been Democratic for decades, and some of the rural areas were more Democratic too back then, which is why I think Kennedy could pull it off. I don't know if Kennedy, I don't think he would have picked Mondale like Carter did, but I guess I'll say Kennedy pulling it off despite Mondale not being on the ticket, because I believe we'd have pretty good Minneapolis support. Maybe do decent in some rural areas. So I think Minnesota will go a little closer, but I can see Kennedy's still pulling it off. The state of Wisconsin, I think, would be a close one. Like I said, they go for Carter. His strengths, like I said, definitely came in the Driftless area, working class areas. Ford did better elsewhere, like in the WOW counties. It was a 49-47 margin, so pretty close there, but I think since Carter was able to pull it off, that Kennedy could pull it off too, because of Driftless area support and coming off Watergate and things like that. I don't think people would want to really vote for Ford, especially in partnering Nixon. Left a bad taste in people's mouths. Iowa, however, I think would be a close one, but I did actually go for Ford. So I think for that reason that Ford was still winning against Kennedy. It is a farm state, just like Wisconsin and Minnesota, which is why I think it could be a close one. But I think, like I said, Kennedy being more to the left of Carter would kind of turn off some voters in the state, especially farmers. So that's why I say it going for Kennedy, Ford. And the state of Illinois, I think, would be another close one. I did go for Ford, though. I think Cook County, Chicago would definitely be competitive between the two. And maybe Kennedy could pull it out in the end, but I think since Ford was able to win it, they might narrowly pull it off, but just because some of the rural areas might be turned off by Kennedy being more to the left of Carter, so I think that could end Ford State in still a close one, maybe 1 to 2 points. But that's another toss-up, I believe. Indiana, I think, will go for him pretty solidly, though. It hasn't really ever been a Democratic state much, besides like 2008 and 1964, and not even often a Democratic state before that, too. I think Ford would do better in southern Indiana, where Carter did better, because, like I said, Kennedy would be more to the left of Ford. So I think Indiana would go for Ford. The state of Missouri was one that actually went for Carter, but I think because Kennedy wouldn't have as strong a rural support like Carter, that this would go for Ford in the end. The state of Arizona over here, I think, would go for Ford pretty solidly. Definitely more rural states back then, so I don't really see Kennedy making these competitive. Same with Colorado, and I think New Mexico was a close one, but they go for Ford in the end. And like I said, Kennedy being more of a progressive Democrat, I don't think it would really go too well in a state like New Mexico that has a big oil industry. So I think they would opt to go for Ford since they did even against Carter. The West Coast here, all went for Ford. I kind of say being close because I think Kennedy could do pretty well, like around Portland and the Seattle suburbs, but they tend to be more Republican, the suburbs in the state, which is why I think Ford would pull them off and even win California. But I can see this being close because, like I said, Kennedy doing pretty well in the Bay Area, but I think Reagan, who actually ran in 76, was trying to primary Ford, but came close to primary him out, but Ford was able to get the nomination. I think Reagan, I believe he did endorse Ford despite trying to challenge him at the convention, so I think Reagan will come out and campaign for him in the general election. I think it'll be enough to and for the state in a close one because of Reagan's influence. The South here, I think, is definitely going to be interesting because it's not Carter. And I think for that reason that Ford would actually take a lot of these states that Carter won, like Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, the state of Virginia, because of the suburbs there. They were more Republican back then. And I think he would take the state of Texas. I would say Ford would pretty much sweep a lot of the South because, like I said, like I keep on saying, Kennedy was more to the left of Carter, and I don't really see that boding well for him, especially in the South. He was more a progressive Democrat, where Carter was saying more of a moderate centrist kind of Democrat, kind of like Bill Clinton. So that's why I say the South actually voting Ford here, since Kennedy is on the ticket. The state of West Virginia, however, I think would be a close one because it tended to have a really long Democratic streak, which is why I think it would be a close one. It would definitely be closer with Kennedy on the ballot. But it was a pretty solid margin that Carter won it by. Like I said, I think it could be a little closer, maybe under 10, but since Carter was able to pull it out, and it was a hard state to flip back then for Republicans that really voted Democratic a lot of years. I believe it did go for Reagan in 84 and for Nixon in 72, but other than that, it had a really long Democratic streak, so maybe Kennedy could still pull it off. But I think it would get a little closer. But I could see it going to him in the end. The state of Pennsylvania, I think, would be another close one. I could see Ford doing pretty well, like in Bucks County and some of the eastern counties there towards the suburbs, but I think Kennedy could probably still do well in western PA since Carter was able to, and like I said, it's more of a northeastern state. So maybe Kennedy would never really pull it off. The state of Ohio, however, I think is more rural, and the suburbs there are more Republican, like Columbus, where Jesse Ford doing well in. It was a narrow one that Carter was able to pull off because of having good support, like in the northeastern part. But I think the rural areas in the state wouldn't like Kennedy, as I talked about here in the South, which is why I think I would go for Ford, just because the rural areas in the state not wanting to vote for him. And this just leaves the state of Florida, which was won by Carter. But like I said, another southern state that I don't think would be too enthused for Kennedy. So I'll give it to President Ford. So it kind of wins in a landslide here, just about 375 to Kennedy gets 162. So definitely doing well in the Northeast and pulling out West Virginia and winning Wisconsin and Minnesota. If there was a state that had to flip, it might be Wisconsin or maybe West Virginia, but I just think West Virginia was too much of a Democratic state for it to flip. And Wisconsin, I think, would, like I said, would kind of narrow up some, but I think the Driftless area would still go for Kennedy because of the stagflation and stuff that was going on in the 70s. So yeah, like I said, Kennedy's strength definitely comes here in the Northeast, while Ford does better elsewhere in the West or the South. And that gives him a pretty huge victory here, despite the stagflation, Watergate. But I just think Kennedy would be seen to his farther left for this national environment. Kind of like McGovern in 72, but he does do better than McGovern. I don't think it would be as left as McGovern, but it definitely be more to the left of Carter, as I've explained. So that's why I kind of see him having weakness in a lot of areas. Besides, like I said, the Northeast is their strength. But if you enjoyed this video, just comment below. Tell me your thoughts on this, whether you agree with it or not. If you think Kennedy would do better than this, if I'm underestimating him or not, just like I said, comment below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you next time.